Okay, this is probably like the ugliest mold I've ever made, so just ignore the mold box. There's silicone everywhere because kind of got distracted and kind of got spilled everywhere. So this excess silicone would normally not be here. This mold box is just foam board. I buy the cheap stuff from the Dollar Tree. You can buy fancier stuff from Hobby Lobby. It doesn't really matter. It's going to get destroyed either way. I used to make really fancy mold boxes out of Legos that were reusable. They looked a lot nicer, but they're kind of a pain to get the silicone off of. Also, I didn't buy name brand Legos, so you get like spacing in between and get silicone stuck in there, and it was a pain. If you buy name brand Legos, they fit a lot tighter, so you can make much nicer mold boxes. And if you're making a lot of mold boxes, I do recommend that because, again, it's reusable. My dream is to cut some nice acrylic pieces and reuse those acrylic pieces over and over and over again. I just have never sat down and measured what sizes I need. So for right now, like I said, I just use foam board. It's cheap. It's not reusable though, that's the only downside. I end up just throwing it away. And I did spray this with mold release before I poured the silicone, so hopefully it'll be easier to get off. Of course, it's not plain nice. Sometimes it'll pop right off, and it's real easy, especially if you get a lot of mold release in there, but I decided I didn't want to play nice. And sorry about my really loud squeaking chair. I didn't think about that sitting at this table. And also all the background noises of all the animals. Enjoy the sounds of nature. I'm sure my birds are going to be loud here in a little bit. And my dog, of course, is in here lapping up water. Dog doesn't understand why I'm working at this table, not in my studio. This was just easier because I didn't feel like carrying these heavy molds into another room. So this is the boring part. This is just removing the mold box from the outside of the silicone. Usually it is not this hard, but I decided to make a very complicated shaped mold. Trying to save on material probably wasn't the best idea because it becomes more frustrating. I guess it depends on how much time you want to save versus material. A normal mold box without all these weird corners would come off a lot easier. And this one, I cut off corners, like I said, to save material. So yeah, I saved a little silicone, but it's probably gonna take me twice as long to open this mold and just get this mold box off. And I'm just using an X-Acto knife to cut it. Silicone's, you know, soft and easy to cut, so no big deal. No specialty tools there. I say it came out pretty easily. Can't really see what I'm filming here, so let me move this so I can make sure I'm still in view there. Okay, so this is our silicone mold. This is just some paper from the mold box. Doesn't really hurt anything. Leave it on there if you want to. It just doesn't look very pretty. And this one, unfortunately, I didn't get flush with the bottom, so you see I have a bunch of extra silicone here where the actual dragon is. All that'll get removed. Only specialty tool I have right here is these are retractors. These are actually used like in the dental industry, orthodontics. They're kind of scary looking. Basically, they're hemostats that lock open that have these nice wide ends to them. I used to use hemostats, just regular ones, and kind of pry in here to hold it open, but these are awesome. It's like having another hand to hold your mold open for you. I've tried everything. I used to use popsicle sticks to wedge in there, pieces of cardboard, but these are like the best thing, and they're cheap. You can get them off Amazon, I think, for like, I think I may have paid 10 bucks for these. I really need to go get another pair, so I've got extras. So we're just gonna take our X-Acto knife here and remove the silicone that I don't need. It's a nice little thin layer, so I can kind of see where it needs to be removed. I can see where my sculpture is. Try not to remove it. It's gonna kind of remove on its own, really. You can see the structure. And I'm gonna try to keep this in view the whole time. You can see there's the bottom of the sculpture there. And normally this doesn't happen. Normally I've got it flush enough against the bottom piece of foam board that I don't get a lot of silicone that wedged itself in between. This may have happened this time. I may have moved the mold too much when I was pouring, or I just didn't get it flush enough, or who knows. But it's not a big deal. It's just a little bit of wasted silicone. Like I said, this is like one of my ugliest, messiest molds. Probably not the best example to be showing, but hey, it works. So I'm trying not to cut too far in to where his neck is, so I don't have a lot of stuff to sand later, but I think I may have already accidentally cut a little too far, which is not the end of the world. It just means that I'll have more sand. I'm gonna actually leave that little flap there, and hopefully it won't tear off on the first pour. So, and normally when I do this, I draw a line on the foam board, so normally I have a nice center line to go by, but it didn't transfer. Again, that's because I got this extra layer of silicone, which may or may not end up coming off over time. I'm not that worried about it, just a little extra. Mold, this mold here is just gonna be, you know, it's functional. It's not pretty. So I'm just kind of cutting a zigzag here that's gonna act more or less as like a key, because this is not done in a two-part, so there are no keys. I kind of have to create them so it'll line back together. You don't want to zigzag all the way down to your sculpture, because then you'll get, you know, zigzag shaped mold lines, which are not pretty. So I'm just zigzagging on the outer edge of the silicone, not all the way down to the sculpture. And you actually don't have to even zigzag all the way around if you don't want to. You can just kind of start it, get you some keys going, and then just kind of cut straight down from there, because you want to cut as straight to the sculpture as you possibly can. Like up against this tail here, I don't know if you can really see that, but I want to make sure that's a pretty straight line, because that mold line, every time it shows up, the more crooked it is, the harder it's going to be to cut. So I'm just cutting straight down using just a regular old X-Acto knife, nothing fancy. And this is where I will start using my retractors here pretty soon. So take these nice little things, stick the retractors in there and lock them open. So now you can really see where you need to cut the silicone. It's a lot easier than having to try to pull this open with your fingers or something. I've strained my hands a few times trying to keep or cut a mold open. Excuse me while I'm going to be drinking coffee while doing this, because it's early in the morning here. And normally I will cut maybe halfway around one way, and then I'll go back and start cutting halfway the other way. It just makes things a lot easier. No real reason behind it, just easier getting something out of the mold. And normally too, I will cut, or I will draw a nice black line all the way around my sculpture when I get done. So when I'm cutting, I can see where I want my mold lines. And of course, I completely forgot to do it with this guy. So I'm just kind of playing by ear where the mold lines will go. Normally I don't do that though. And that just pops out. So I used to do this with popsicle sticks, and it'd be hilarious if a popsicle stick go flying across the room when that happened. But these wonderful little tools, when they want to cooperate, are like the best $10 investment you'll make when it comes to opening silicone molds. Thanks to Emily Sculpts for that. I watched one of her videos and she was using one of these, and I thought, okay, she's a genius. And she really is. So, and unfortunately I can't really see where my sculpture is because I didn't draw that line, like I said. So just tip for anybody doing this, before you pour your silicone, draw a black line all the way around your sculpture. Trust me, it will save you a big headache later, because then you can really, like I said, you can tell where you want your mold lines to be. There's no second guessing it or anything, or cutting some bizarre shape or something. I've actually put mold lines in bad spots before and had to go back with Dremels once the piece is cast and reform the mold line and then redo the mold. So, which isn't too big a deal. A lot of people do, you know, 2 molds of a sculpture. They'll do what they call a waste mold first to get it right, then they'll go back and, you know, they'll cast it and change and fix some things, and then they'll go back and do a nice 2-part mold. I have done that before, and sometimes you just have to. Sometimes your molds just don't like turn out correctly. So I'm about halfway. Downside to doing an odd shaped mold too is it doesn't want to sit proper. If this had been just a nice big square, I could just sit it here and it would be no big deal. Again, sometimes saving materials not always the best when it comes to saving time. It's kind of a trade-off. And you can see this piece is still kind of hard to get in here, but not too bad. And hopefully you can kind of see if my hands aren't just all in the way. I'm just cutting straight down into the silicone. And of course, this silicone's cured, but when working with silicone, when you're pouring your mold and stuff like that, always use proper safety equipment and gloves and all that fun stuff, because this stuff is so messy. Resin casting's messy too, but nowhere near as bad as working silicone. I'll end up with it all everywhere though. I'm just a messy artist though. I'll end up with it in my hair and everywhere. So I get about to that point, and not really halfway, but I got one side, and I'm gonna flip to the other side here. Start working on that one. This will just make things easier when you're pulling apart the mold. And one downside, and I just cut that little piece. Didn't mean to, but oh well. One downside to doing this way, of course, your original sculpture is just pretty much destroyed. So you don't get to reuse it or anything. I mean, some people I know can get the mold open like perfectly and have a sculpture 90% intact and reuse it. I'm not one of those people. I tend to gouge into it too much and can't get those retractors in there quite yet. Not enough silicone out of the way, so. And of course, be careful when using X-Acto knives. They are sharp. I cut myself many times. It's kind of a duh. And see, here would be very beneficial had I drawn a mold line, because I can't really tell where my sculpture is, and this one's a little complicated, so he does have hands that stick out, so I'm kind of trying to figure out where those are at right now without accidentally removing this piece of silicone that I cut into. And of course I just tore it off, so that little piece is just going to sit there. I may or may not put it back on the mold. And if you do ever tear your mold the first time and you don't, you know, get a master cast out of it, there are techniques you can do to glue little pieces back in. I've seen people use like regular store-bought silicone, like silicone adhesive basically that you use for like a fish tank. Works pretty good. Kind of get out of camera here, sorry about that. But yeah, that kind of silicone for a fish tank, you can use that stuff to like glue pieces back in as like a temporary fix too, so you can at least get like a single cast, and then you can go back and make another mold. Or same thing if like you have a mold that you've been using and it tears and you just need to do one more cast. Well, fish tank silicone is a good thing to keep around, because it's basically just silicone glue. Of course, I'm working in an area where I probably don't have the best light, so it's always a good idea to work somewhere where you have adequate lighting. I should be doing this in my studio, but like I said, I didn't feel like carrying these around. I have a back injury right now, so carrying heavy mold was not a fun idea. These molds weigh quite a bit. Silicone's very dense and heavy. So I can see here I have a hand that's kind of going to be in a weird spot, so I'm going to have kind of an odd mold line. But that's nothing that you can't clean up with a Dremel. Dremel tool once you make your casting. I always clean up mold lines. There's a lot of people that don't, and you know, it's kind of a matter of personal preference. If you don't want to sand them off. You don't have to, but I always go back with a Dremel and sand off little areas and clean it up. So this is gonna pose to be a pain in the butt here. I think I need more coffee. I think that's what it is. And I wish they made smaller extractors, but I've only ever found them in this one big size. Small ones would be awesome to get in these little small tight places, because this is a small dragon. Sorry if I'm getting my head in the way at any point. Try to remember too how this guy was designed, so I can kind of remember where his features were. And he's going to be a little bit more difficult than most of my dragons because his head has a bit of a tilt to it, so I won't have a straight mold line running up his head. So this is going to be a fun one. And downside to silicone molds is they only last so long. Of course, you know, the better care you take of them, the longer they'll last. Using silicone mold release, stuff like that will help them to last longer. Powdering your molds and everything. Okay, so his mold line is going to be kind of down the side of his face. That's something I'll probably end up, more than likely, doing a couple of castings, cleaning up with the Dremel, see how I like it. And if I don't, I'll probably end up going back and creating another mold later. I did this with another dragon that had the same kind of tilted head going on. It became kind of an issue. You can see here where the arm, this is like a little arm nub here, so his arm actually comes straight across here. So what you'll have to do is actually cut a line across here for that to open up when you cast, because otherwise your resin won't come out. So now when I cast and this opens up, I open up the mold, I'll just kind of flip this out of the way and then I'll have that complete arm. It looks weird now because the retractors are in the way. Same thing on this side, he has this other arm that comes out, so I'll have to actually cut a line there. I'll wait on cutting that though once they get the whole mold open. And so basically just keep going with the zigzags. I probably won't zigzag the back of the mold though, because I think these side pieces will be enough of a key to hold together. And that's just for my benefit, for when I'm putting the mold together. You can see this other arm is still stuck in here, so I actually have to cut from that arm over. And this, I'm just doing a straight line. There's no need to key this or anything, just cutting straight to that piece. So I know that it'll come out when I cast it. And sometimes when you do your first casting, you can see areas, obviously, that like an air bubble gets trapped or something just isn't fitting together right. And sometimes you can go back with an X-Acto and kind of alter the mold a little bit. I've done that before, kind of cut little vents back in where like an air bubble gets trapped under the chin and just cut right into the silicone. Because again, you know, silicone's soft and you can work with it. Not really gonna hurt it as long as you're not like cutting some kind of major detail off or something. So yeah, so don't be afraid to alter molds when you get done. So yeah, we can actually see his head now. At least I can. I don't think you can see it from your angle, but. And some people don't cut their mold all the way open and just kind of have it where it's joined together. It's a good idea when you want to match up seams and stuff. I always cut mine all the way open. No particular reason, really. It's kind of a matter of personal choice there, I guess. I just find it easier just to have a two-part mold and easier to open up and get the resin casting out and re-powder and, you know, respray with mold release and stuff, and it's a two-part. You hear weird squeaky noises in the background. It's my dog playing with a toy, so. And here I'm just gonna kind of quit zigzagging. I'm just gonna do some big kind of loops there, just to get that out of the way. Let's see, I'm switch to the back of the mold. And I'd already zigzagged up here, so I kind of messed up there and went the wrong direction. But that's no problem. I just won't cut any deeper on that little slash that I made. And yeah, I have accidentally cut pieces off before, not paid attention, because these, when you go to cut fresh silicone like this, it will reheal itself pretty quickly, so you're gonna have to really watch where you've already cut. Because you think, oh, I haven't cut that spot yet, and you realize that you actually have, and the silicone just kind of healed itself back together. Which, that's good though when you're casting, because that means your mold lines will be a lot smaller. Most of these molds I do, the first couple of castings, you can just scrape the mold line off, the flashing off with your thumbnail. It's so nice. And of course, as the time goes on, the mold gets used more. You don't get that luxury, unfortunately. But that's just one of those things that happens with silicone. So I'm gonna just keep cutting. This is kind of the boring part. You can kind of see where I drew some lines afterwards. I kind of remembered a little bit of lines on this guy. I'm just using this retractor to cut it open so I can see where I'm going. Try not to get too far off to one side though. Sometimes you're gonna have to go back and rethink where you're cutting. You end up with like a little thin piece of silicone again. Not a problem, just you have to be careful when you open the mold. Or like I said, glue it back in place. This particular type of cut is called a jeweler's cut. This is the same way you would cut open a mold when doing lost wax casting. I don't know any of the other terminologies for other types of cutting open molds. I'm sure there's names for every single one of them, but jeweler's cut is the one that I always use. Because what I do is kind of similar to lost wax casting. Try to get the tractors to hit me in the face. And there's the tail, so we pretty much got the mold line right where I wanted it on the back, which is always nice when you get it in the right spot. And of course, there's some deep chunks of silicone way down in there that have to be cut. I just have one little piece that doesn't let go. Alright, so we got that. There's my original keys that I cut there for the other side. And we're open. So we got one half. And my little vents here, I'll have to get another pair of hemostats. You can see the sculpture's not in horrible shape. His arm kind of got ripped off, but his body's mostly intact. Oop, and his head came off. So yeah, you can see this is kind of what happens to the sculpture afterwards. Sculpture's really shiny because I seal them with crystal clear before I pour silicone. That's to help seal the clay so it doesn't leach into the silicone. Always a good idea, depending on what kind of silicone you're working with. You can see his head's kind of somewhat intact. And you can see here where I cut in, hopefully maybe you can, there we go. You can see the notches here. That's where the mold line will end up being across his face. And that's actually not a bad spot. It doesn't hit the nose or anything, so that'll just be something I can kind of just Dremel off and should cast pretty well. I had hoped to make the mold line more centered, but like I said, his head was tilted, so I kind of feel that was going to happen. So you can see there's some little like stray silicone, just kind of pull those out. And I will have to get, what I was saying, I'll have to get some hemostats to get these out, if I can show you. I don't know if you can see a little wire sticking out. These were vents that I put in for air bubbles. So I'll have to get that. There's one up in the horn. There's, like I said, there's one there on the cheek. There's a couple down here in the chin that I'll have to go back and pull out. And then those will fill with resin and get pulled out each time I do a casting. So those prevent air bubbles in all the undercuts. So that's it. And then we've got our new mold for Happy Dragon. This is number 9, I think. Can't do math in my head. Haven't had enough coffee. So that's it.